Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today we're diving into a story so chilling, so steeped in forgotten history, that it just might make you rethink everything you thought you knew about ancient Egypt. This isn't your typical pyramid tour, folks. This is something else entirely. Get ready for the Jackal Priest, Part 1. Imagine places in Egypt that time itself seems to fear. Not just forgotten, but deliberately erased from memory, buried under layers of fear, rumor, and outright warning. These aren't on any tourist map. They exist in silence, deep in the shadows. South of Minya, where the mighty Nile River makes a serpent-like bend in the sand, there's a monastery hidden amongst towering cliffs. And trust me, nobody goes near it. The local villagers, they avoid it like the plague. Travelers, they don't even whisper its name. Even official maps pretend it doesn't exist. The locals have a name for this eerie place, though. They call it Deir el-Sanmit, the Monastery of Silence. And oh, the stories they tell. Some say it was abandoned centuries ago, a victim of a devastating plague that wiped out every single monk. But then there are the darker whispers, whispers of soldiers finding the monks, not just dead, but butchered, mummified like ancient Egyptians, but not for burial, not for honor. No, these mummies were for something far more sinister: sacrifice. Gives you goosebumps, right? But the real, undeniable reason no one dares approach Deir el-Sanmit, it's because sometimes when the wind dies down, when the night is utterly still and clear, you can hear it chanting, coming from inside that abandoned, cliff-side monastery. Ancient words, forbidden words. And here's the kicker: they aren't prayers. Oh no, these are invocations. Calls to something ancient, something powerful. Now, our protagonist, Karim, had heard these wild stories his entire life. Curses, ancient rituals, dark gods. He scoffed at them. He thought it was all just sensationalized tourist fodder, clickbait for the internet. But then something happened that changed everything. A video appeared online. Grainy, shaky footage, but undeniably showing a flickering light deep within the abandoned monastery in the dead of night. That's when Karim's curiosity shifted. It turned into a full-blown obsession. So when his friends started planning a weekend filming trip to Upper Egypt, Karim had only one goal in mind: find that monastery. He was determined to prove the legends wrong, to expose them for the myths they were, and in the process, make a documentary that would absolutely go viral. He wanted to break the internet with the truth. The group was a motley crew of 5, each bringing their own unique perspective to this wild adventure. First, there was Karim himself, the filmmaker, driven by an insatiable curiosity and a bold spirit that sometimes bordered on recklessness. Then there was Nur, the sharp-tongued journalism student, a complete skeptic who wouldn't believe anything without hard evidence. She was there to poke holes in every theory. Hassan, on the other hand, was the polar opposite. He was the believer, raised on a steady diet of stories about jinn and ancient curses, his heart already thrumming with nervous anticipation. Mona, the historian, brought a calm, intelligent perspective, ready to analyze any artifacts or historical clues they might uncover. And finally, there was Tarek, their local guide from Minya, hired to lead them through the treacherous terrain and local customs. He was the one who knew the land. Their journey led them to a small village, just as the sun began its slow descent below the horizon. It felt like stepping into a time capsule. Mud brick houses lined narrow, dusty alleys. Old men sat outside silent cafes, puffing on shisha pipes, their eyes following the strangers. Women, with a quiet urgency, pulled their children indoors the moment they saw the group approaching. Everything about this place screamed that it was frozen in time, untouched by the modern world. Tariq led them to a small guest house, a humble dwelling run by an old woman. As they stepped inside, she eyed them with an unnerving sense of unease, her gaze piercing. "You came for Dar el-Sanmit, didn't you?" she asked, her voice a hushed whisper that cut through the silence. Karim froze. He hadn't even mentioned the monastery yet. How could she know? "How did you—" he began, but she cut him off, her eyes fixed on his. "You shouldn't be here," she warned, her voice gaining a surprising firmness. "That place is not abandoned. It is watched." Nur, ever the skeptic, scoffed. "Watched? By whom? Ghosts?" She tried to sound dismissive, but there was a tremor of unease in her voice. The old woman didn't even blink. Her gaze remained unwavering. "No, by a man, a priest. They say he walks at night, wearing the head of a jackal. He guards the monastery. He takes offerings." Hassan shifted uncomfortably, his belief in ancient tales making him particularly susceptible to her words. "What kind of offerings?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. The old woman's eyes moved slowly, deliberately, across each of their faces. One by one, she met their gazes, and then she delivered the chilling answer. Flesh. A heavy, suffocating silence descended upon the room. The air grew thick with unspoken fear. Then, Karim, ever the rationalist, forced a laugh. He had to break the tension. "Come on," he said, trying to sound jovial. "Ancient rituals? Jackal priests? That's mythology? We're making a documentary, not a horror movie." He tried to dismiss it, to lighten the mood, but the old woman wasn't swayed. She stepped closer, her eyes locking onto Karim's. "You want advice?" she asked, her voice low and grave. "Leave before nightfall. Go back where you came from. Because if you go to that monastery, you will not all return." And with that ominous warning, the first chapter of their terrifying journey concludes. What do you think? Is the old woman just telling an old wives' tale? Or is there something truly sinister lurking in Dar el-Sanmit? Karim and his friends are about to find out, and so are we. Night has completely swallowed Minya, painting the sky in shades of endless dark. The last hint of sunset is gone, leaving only a sliver of moonlight struggling to pierce through the heavy curtain of night. Inside a small guest house, a group of brave, or maybe crazy, explorers are having a heated debate. "We go in the morning," Mona insisted, her voice firm. "We still don't know the terrain. It's too risky in the dark." She had a point, right? Common sense says wait for daylight. But Karim, the leader, had a different vision. "No," he shot back, his eyes glinting with determination. "If we go in daylight, the footage will look like any other abandoned building, sterile, predictable. We go now, we show the world what's really inside that monastery. The raw, unfiltered truth, not some sunlit, watered-down version." He wanted to capture the true essence, the very soul of the place. Then a low murmur from Hassan, almost a whisper, cut through the air. "Or what's haunting it?" Oof. Chills, right? Nur, ever the skeptic, just rolled her eyes. "Seriously?" She scoffed. But deep down you could tell, even she felt that prickle of unease. But it was already decided. That insatiable human curiosity had, once again, completely defeated caution. You know that feeling, right? when you just have to know? They began packing their gear, cameras, flashlights, high-tech recording equipment. As they gathered their things, Tarek paused by the door. He rubbed a small, worn leather charm hanging from his neck, whispering something under his breath. A silent prayer, a ward against evil. We can only guess before finally following the others out into the inky blackness. They left the village on foot, the silence thick around them, moving across cracked, unforgiving earth and silent fields. With every step, the wind grew colder, biting at their exposed skin. It wasn't just quiet, it was unervingly silent. No animals, no crickets chirping, not even the distant hum of traffic from a far-off road. Just darkness, and an oppressive silence that pressed in on all sides. It felt like the world itself was holding its breath. After what felt like an eternity, but was probably closer to an hour of trudging through the unseen landscape, they finally reached the base of the towering cliffs. "There," Tarek said, his voice barely a whisper, pointing a trembling finger. Hidden in the stone like a shadow of a forgotten building stood the monastery. It was more ruin than structure. Its towers were broken, jagged teeth against the night sky. Its walls, half buried in centuries of sand and gnarled roots, looked like skeletal remains. Arches sagged under the weight of time, and black, vacant windows stared outward like dead eyes, watching them, judging them. The stories they'd heard, the ancient legends whispered in hushed tones around campfires, hadn't been exaggerated. If anything, they'd understated the sheer, oppressive aura of the place. "This place is wrong," Hassan whispered, his voice laced with genuine fear, his breath clouding in the cold night air. "No," Mona corrected him, her scientific mind always seeking the truth beyond superstition. "It's ancient," and she was right. It wasn't just wrong. It was profoundly old, steeped in history that predated modern understanding. Karim, ever the filmmaker, raised his camera, his eyes gleaming with anticipation. "And tonight," he declared, his voice filled with a strange blend of reverence and excitement, "it becomes history again. History, but with their cameras as witnesses." They began to scan the outer courtyard, their flashlights cutting through the gloom like hesitant fingers. They stepped carefully over shattered crosses and broken pillars, each one a testament to forgotten faith. But then they noticed something truly unsettling. Strange symbols were carved deep into the weathered stone, not the familiar Christian symbols they expected. No, these carvings were older, sharper, violent. You could almost feel the raw primal energy radiating from them. Nur, always the first to investigate, shined her powerful flashlight directly onto one of the carvings. "This isn't Coptic," she said, her voice laced with confusion, a frown creasing her brow. "These are—" She stopped abruptly, her words catching in her throat, a sudden realization dawning on her face. Hassan, ever watchful, finished her sentence for her, his voice barely audible. "Hieroglyphs. But not just any hieroglyphs." Mona stepped closer, her academic curiosity overriding any fear. She carefully brushed away centuries of sand from an inscription, her eyes widening as she deciphered the ancient script. No, not normal hieroglyphs. These are funerary markings meant for embalming chambers. The implications hit them like a physical blow. What are embalming symbols doing in a monastery? Nar asked, her voice reflecting the profound confusion that gripped them all. No one had an answer. The silence that followed was heavy, pregnant with unspoken questions and growing dread. Kareem, trying to regain control and push forward, raised his camera again, the whir of its lens a jarring sound in the oppressive quiet. All right, we enter from the main hall. Stay close, everyone, and do not break formation. Whatever happens, we stick together. With a decisive push, he opened the massive old wooden doors. They groaned open with a chilling, drawn-out shriek, like a dying animal taking its last breath, protesting their intrusion. Inside, only absolute darkness waited, a void that seemed to swallow their flashlight beams. Then a sound. It started low, a deep rumble that vibrated through the very stones beneath their feet. It was repetitive, a steady, hypnotic pulse. It was a voice, chanting. Everyone froze. Their flashlights danced wildly as they instinctively recoiled, their hearts hammering in their chests. That can't be real, Nora whispered, her voice barely a breath, her usual skepticism replaced by sheer disbelief. But the chanting continued, unwavering, slow, ancient, guttural, undeniably ritualistic. Mona, her face pale, her hands trembling, slowly recognized the cadence, the almost forgotten sounds. It's in ancient Egyptian, she breathed, her knowledge of languages suddenly becoming a source of terror. Hassan swallowed hard, his throat dry. What's it saying? He choked out, fear etched onto his face. She hesitated, her eyes wide with a mixture of horror and understanding, before finally answering, her voice barely a whisper against the rising crescendo of the chant. Anubis, guardian of the dead, accept this offering. And just like that, the chanting stopped. The sudden silence was even more terrifying than the sound itself. What was happening here? What kind of offering? For a long moment, no one breathed. The silence was heavy, almost suffocating. You could practically taste the centuries of dust and decay. That's when Hassan, always the first to voice the unspoken, whispered, "We're not alone." Kareem, ever the pragmatist, just shook his head. There's probably someone else exploring. Maybe villagers messing around, kids looking for thrills. He was trying to rationalize, to break the tension, but even his voice sounded a little off. But Mona, she heard something else. Her eyes were wide, fixed on a distant, barely perceptible echo in the vastness of the hall. "No," she said slowly, her voice barely a whisper. "That chant, it wasn't modern. It wasn't human. And believe me, when Mona says something isn't human, you listen." Before anyone could reply, before we could even process what she meant, Tarek reached into his bag. His movements were slow, deliberate, as if he was performing an ancient ritual. And then he pulled it out, a small, unassuming jar of salt. Nur blurted out, "What the hell is that for?" Tarek looked embarrassed, a flush rising on his cheeks, but his gaze was determined, unyielding. "Just trust me," he said, his voice low. "It's protection." Kareem, of course, scoffed. "Protection from what, ghosts?" He laughed, a short, sharp sound that didn't quite reach his eyes. Tarek didn't answer. Instead, with a quiet intensity that silenced Kareem's smirk, he carefully sprinkled a thin line of salt behind them, right at the entrance. Mona watched him, her expression unreadable. She didn't laugh. They moved deeper inside, a silent procession. The monastery's main hall was a testament to time's unforgiving march. Pillars were snapped, lying in ruins. Parts of the ceiling had collapsed, leaving gaping wounds open to the sky. Faded Coptic frescoes, once vibrant, now clung to the walls in cracked, peeling fragments, telling stories no one remembered. But as they stepped further, a new, unsettling detail began to emerge, slowly, subtly at first, then with an undeniable, horrifying clarity. Painted over the ancient crosses, scraped into the very stone of the walls, drawn in dark, dried stains that looked suspiciously like, well, they didn't want to think about it. There was a symbol. Again and again it appeared. A jackal head. Not just any jackal, but a strikingly rendered, almost menacing depiction. And the most disturbing part? It was carved where the face of Christ used to be, defiling sacred images with this pagan, animalistic presence. Hassan, his face pale with a mixture of horror and confusion, muttered, "What kind of monastery worships Anubis?" Mona, ever the historian, shook her head, her voice tight with anger. "They didn't," she said, her eyes tracing the grotesque alterations. "This was defiled. Someone desecrated this place. It wasn't just old. It was wrong." Karim, oblivious to the growing unease, was already scanning with his camera. "Good. Keep talking. It's excellent narration," he mumbled, more to himself than to us. Mona glared at him, her patience wearing thin. "This is not a joke," she snapped. Karim, without missing a beat, retorted, "Neither is viewership." He had a point, in his own twisted way, but it wasn't the time or place. But before they could argue further, before any of them could articulate the creeping dread, they heard it. A sound that cut through the silence, making every hair on our necks stand on end. A metallic dragging sound somewhere deeper inside the monastery. It was like iron on stone. Slow, relentless scrape. Then silence, then scrape again. Each scrape felt like a nail dragging across a chalkboard, echoing through the broken halls. "Someone's here," Nur whispered, her voice trembling. Hassan, his earlier cynicism replaced by genuine fear, corrected her. "Or something." Tarek, his face grim, reached into his pocket again. He pulled out a piece of string and, with quick, practiced movements, tied it around his wrist. His lips moved, whispering something in Arabic, something old, something that sounded like a desperate prayer, a ward against unseen horrors. Karim, despite everything, was still drawn by the thrill of the chase. He moved forward, his camera steady. "Come on." We followed the sound. The noise led us to a room at the far end of the main hall, a chamber even more desolate than the rest. What remained of the altar lay shattered on the floor, its sacred purpose long forgotten, and beneath it a massive hole had been carved through the stone, raw and jagged, leading down somewhere. An old staircase, cut crudely into black rock, descended into the abyss below. It wasn't just dark. It was a hungry, consuming blackness. Tarek took one look at it and recoiled, stepping back so abruptly he almost bumped into Nur. "No," he said, his voice firm, unwavering. Karim turned to him, his expression one of disbelief. "What now? We came all this way." "We're not going down there," Tarek repeated, his eyes fixed on the black maw. "Some doors aren't meant to be opened." Karim stared at him, his mouth set in a hard line. "This is exactly why we came. If we turn back now, we're cowards." He was right, in a way, about why we were there, but Tarek wasn't swayed by pride. "I don't care," he said, his voice low and guttural. "There's something evil here. Can't you feel it?" Mona looked into the darkness below. She could feel it or something close to it. A cold, oppressive presence that seemed to emanate from the depths. But curiosity, that insatiable human drive for discovery, burned deeper in her than fear. "I'm going," she said, her voice steady. Kareem nodded, a glint of triumph in his eyes. Same. Hassan hesitated, his gaze darting between Tarek and the darkness. But then, true to his nature, he followed Mona. Nur looked terrified, her face pale, but she wasn't leaving alone. She clung to Hassan's arm, her eyes wide. Tarek stood at the threshold, shaking his head slowly, a silent protest. Then he spoke, his voice grave, a warning hanging heavy in the air. Fine, but if we go down there, nothing we meet will be human. And with that chilling promise echoing in our ears, together we descended into the abyss beneath the monastery. What do you think they found down there? The true horror is just beginning, my friends. But from the moment they step onto those spiraling stone steps, things feel off. Deeper and deeper they go, the air getting thicker, heavier, like breathing inside a grave. The ceiling trembles with every step, dust falling like ghostly snow. Kareem, ever the documentarian, whispers into his camera, Day 1. The monastery isn't abandoned. It's hiding something. This is just the beginning. The staircase finally ends, opening into a corridor carved entirely from black rock. And that's when they see them. Oil lamps mounted on the walls, their flames flickering weakly, as if struggling for air. Noor freezes. Wait, who lit these? A question hanging heavy in the silent, suffocating air. No one has an answer. And then, from the far end of the corridor, a sound emerges. A metallic, dragging sound. Tarek, visibly shaken, backs up. Guys, this doesn't feel like a place we should be. Kareem, focused on the footage, retorts, you said that already. And I'll keep saying it. Tarek snaps back. This isn't normal, Kareem. Something. Before he can finish, a sudden gust of icy wind blasts past them, extinguishing half the lamps, plunging them further into shadow. And then, a low growl echoes from the darkness ahead. It's not human. It's not animal either. It's something in between. Can you feel the tension building? The corridor leads them to two massive stone doors, engraved with unsettling jackal heads and strings of ancient hieroglyphs. Mona, the historian of the group, wipes away centuries of dust, her trembling fingers tracing the carvings. It's a warning, she murmurs, her voice barely a whisper. Hassan, always the nervous one, jumps in. Great. What does it say? Turn back? Danger? Do not enter? Mona slowly shakes her head, her eyes wide. It says the dead do not speak to the living. Those who seek the jackal will be judged, and those who descend do not return. Hassan swallows hard. Yeah, no, we're leaving. But Kareem, driven by an insatiable curiosity, pushes past him. We didn't come this far to turn back now. He places his hands on the colossal door, and to his surprise, it moves. It doesn't creak or resist. It opens easily, almost like it was waiting for them. Tarek, fear etched on his face, warns, don't open that door. But it's already too late. The stone doors part, revealing the horror within, and the smell hits them first, rot, old blood. The distinct, preserved stench of death. They step inside, and everything freezes. The room is immense, an underground temple carved from black stone, lit by dozens of burning torches. Strange, disturbing offerings are scattered across the floor. Bowls of dark, viscous liquid, animal bones, skulls, and in the center of the chamber, a stone table. Strapped to it, a body, a man freshly dead, or so they think. His skin pale, his throat sealed shut with resin, his eyes wide with a terror that chills them to the bone. His chest is cut open, packed with linen and dark, unknown herbs. Nur screams a raw, primal sound. Mona staggers backward, her face ashen. Hassan, overwhelmed, throws up. Karim, despite his shaking hands, raises his camera, desperate to capture the unimaginable. "My God," he whispers. It's an embalming table." Tarek's voice is hollow, devoid of all emotion. "No." He takes a step forward, his gaze fixed on the horrifying scene. "It's not embalming." He points at the man's face, and in that horrifying moment, they all realize the truth. The man's eyes are moving. He's still alive. Barely. His eyelids fluttered, and tears, real tears, traced paths down his temples. His lips moved, struggling, but no sound escaped. His mouth was sealed shut, encased in hardened resin. He was trapped, imprisoned within his own living flesh, buried alive in the most horrific way imaginable. Nur was the first to break the silence, her voice a fractured whisper. "Oh my God. Oh my God, we have to help him. Cut the straps. Get him out." But Karim, ever the documentarian, shook his head, his own voice strained. "No, we need to document this first. This is." Before he could finish, Mona spun towards him, her eyes blazing with a furious light. "Are you insane? This is a human being." Without a second thought, she ripped a knife from Hassan's backpack and rushed towards the table where the man lay. But Tarek, with surprising speed, grabbed her wrist. "Don't," he warned, his voice low but firm. Her eyes, still burning with righteous anger, bore into him. "Get out of my way." Tarek's grip didn't falter. He spoke softly, urgently, as if pleading with her to understand. "You don't understand. If we free him, we interfere in the ritual." Mona was aghast. "What ritual? He's dying." Tarek pointed, his finger tracing the intricate, horrifying symbols carved into the stone all around the table. They were fresh, painted in what looked unmistakably like blood. "Look," he insisted. "This isn't random. This is a consecrated chamber. Someone performed mummification rites here." Hassan, horrified, shook his head. "No, this isn't mummification. They don't embalm people alive." Tarek's gaze lingered on the dying man, a dark, unsettling certainty in his voice. "Someone does." And then, just as the tension reached its peak, something shifted. All the torches around them flickered violently, plunging the chamber into an even deeper, more oppressive darkness. From the shadows beyond the stone pillars, an unseen presence began to stir. A footstep, then another, slow, heavy, deliberate. It was coming closer. Karim's whisper was barely audible. "Someone's here." But Mona's voice, a mere breath, carried a deeper, more profound terror. "No," she gasped. "Not someone." A shadow, immense and unnatural, moved between the pillars. Tall, hunched, it advanced with an unsettling stillness that defied all logic. Tarek, his eyes wide with dawning horror, stepped back slowly. "I've seen this before," he breathed, his voice laced with dread, in old texts, in tomb curses. Nur, trembling uncontrollably, managed to ask, "What is it?" Tarek swallowed hard, the answer catching in his throat. "The guardian of the dead." The figure finally stepped into the flickering torchlight, and the sight was beyond comprehension. It wore ritual priest robes made of dark linen, stained crimson with ancient blood. Its hands were wrapped in strips of cloth, smeared with the same resin that sealed the dying man's mouth. Around its neck hung a necklace of carved bone. And then they saw its head. It was the head of a jackal, But this wasn't a mask. It wasn't leather or wood or metal. It was flesh, real, living, a jackal skull, monstrous and terrifying, fused to a human body. Its fur was matted with blood, its long ears rigid and still, its snout glistening weightly in the torchlight. And deep within that nightmarish head, two red eyes glowed with an ancient, malevolent intelligence. They were watching them, studying them, judging them. Nur collapsed backward, a blood-curdling scream tearing from her throat. Karim, dropping his camera, stumbled back. Hassan's legs gave out beneath him. The Jackal Priest stepped closer, its presence radiating an ancient, chilling power. And then it spoke, in a voice that did not belong in this world, low, hollow, and ancient. It reverberated through the chamber, chilling them to the bone. Who enters the halls of judgment? Silence hung heavy in the air, thick with the dust of ages, until a chilling voice rumbled, shaking them to their core. Who among you seeks passage between life and death? Its presence radiating ancient power and an unsettling animalistic precision. Karim, ever the ambitious leader, tried to play it cool. We're just documenting this place, no trouble. But the creature saw right through him, its voice cutting like a knife. Liar, hungry for glory, blind to consequence. You would sell the dead for your name. Ouch. Then it turned to Nur, the quiet, fearful one. Fearful child. You came here not for truth, but to prove yourself to those who never saw you. Nur broke down, her deepest insecurities laid bare. Even Hassan, the skeptic, was silenced, collapsing in terror when the priest declared, "Your laughter ends." But then it turned to Tarek and paused, a long, unsettling silence. "You know," it rumbled. "You were warned." What did Tarek know? The suspense was unbearable, and just when you thought it couldn't get any more intense, the Jackal Priest leaned into Mona, its gaze piercing. "You are the only one who does not belong here." Talk about a chilling welcome. Before anyone could even process these heavy words, the Jackal Priest slammed its staff, and the entire chamber trembled. Torches flared, sand poured, and hidden mechanisms groaned. Tarek, ever the pragmatist, yelled, "Run!" But it was too late. The massive stone doors slammed shut, sealing their fate. Trapped, the creature raised its hand, and pillars around an embalming table began to turn, revealing cryptic hieroglyphs. Mona, brilliant and observant, whispered, "It's a trial, a ritual of judgment." Karim, panicking, demanded, "Judgment for what?" Tarek grabbed him, his voice grim. "It wants one of us." The Jackal Priest's next words confirmed their worst fears. To trespass the realm of the dead blood must answer blood. It pointed to a man strapped to the embalming slab, barely alive. "The offering is incomplete." Mona's eyes widened. "He wants to finish embalming him. He wants us to watch." But Tarek knew better. "No," he said, his voice heavy. "He wants us to choose." Choose what? Who takes his place? Absolute silence. The air was thick with dread. Karim, fueled by terror, snapped, "No way! We're not choosing anyone." He scrambled, desperately searching for an escape, with Hassan close behind. Nur was inconsolable. Mona stood frozen, staring at the poor soul on the slab. But Tarek, ever calm amidst chaos, knew there was no escape. The Jackal Priest approached the slab, whispered an ancient command. "Nekhem, Senib Te," and the man ceased to struggle. Mona, horrified, rushed forward. "Stop. Why are you doing this? Who are you?" The Jackal Priest turned its ancient gaze to her. I am the hand of judgment. I am the seal of the underworld. I am the priest of the gate. And with that it raised a bronze embalming blade. And you have trespassed where the living are forbidden. Karim, in a desperate act, kicked a lantern, screaming, "Run!" They bolted, running blindly through smoke and darkness, down passage after passage. Karim clutched his camera. Hassan gasped, Nur stumbled, and Mona helped her. Tarek stayed at the rear, watchful. They didn't know where they were going, just that they had to escape that terrifying presence. But then, a horrifying realization dawned. Every passage, every turn, every single path led them right back to where they started. Back to the chamber, back to the altar, back to the stench of death. Karim stared in disbelief. "No, this can't be real," Hassan babbled. We didn't turn, but Tarek, with chilling calm, explained, "This is a death ward, a funerary labyrinth designed to keep souls from leaving the tomb." Nur's voice cracked. "So we're trapped?" Tarek nodded slowly. "Yes." Just then, a growl filled the chamber. They turned, and there he was, the Jackal Priest, blocking the exit, waiting, judging. Karim pleaded, "Please, we don't want to die." The Jackal Priest lifted its staff and pointed it straight at Tarek. "You knew the law of the dead, and yet you led them into the gate." Without hesitation, Tarek stepped forward. "Tarek, what are you doing?" Nur cried. He turned to them, calm, resigned. "There is no way out except one." He faced the creature. "I will go. I offer myself." The Jackal Priest stood silent, then slowly nodded. "Accepted." Before anyone could react, the creature seized Tarek, lifted him effortlessly, and slammed him onto the stone slab. Mona screamed. Hassan tried to reach him but was thrown back. Karim's camera captured Tarek's eyes. He didn't scream. He didn't beg. He looked at his friends one last time and mouthed, "Run." The bronze blade rose. The torchlight turned red. The last thing they heard was the sound of flesh being opened. An absolutely gripping and terrifying story. I know I'm already on the edge of my seat, waiting for part 2. What do you think will happen next to Mona, Karim, Nur, and Hassan? Will they escape the labyrinth? Will they ever truly be free from the shadow of the Jackal Priest? Let me know your theories in the comments below. If you enjoyed this chilling tale, please give this video a big thumbs up, share it with your friends, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you don't miss the next thrilling installment. Thanks for watching and stay spooky.